My name is Troy Williams. I'm living in the East Bay, and I am working as a journalist and producing video and radio productions for various organizations. Tell me where you was locked up at and what type of educational programs that institution provided.
Okay, I was locked up in Corcoran 2. It's Sad F. Like going to school up in there, it was some basic stuff, like too basic.
Myself and 3 other guys armed with weapons ran into this computer parts place and held everybody at gunpoint and moved people around and started to load the truck up with the computer parts. And one of the people inside pushed the silent alarm, and the police came, and when they came, we fled. One of my co-defendants ran into another business which was situated next door and snatched the guy out at gunpoint, forced him to his truck, and carjacked him for his truck. So as a result of my participation in the robbery, I was also found guilty of aggravated kidnapping and sentenced to life in prison.
As California has been trying to find ways to reduce overcrowding in its prisons, many of the changes have focused on people who are serving sentences for nonviolent offenses, often drug-related offenses, which is the right thing to do for sure. But what it leaves behind is this population of life-sentenced prisoners who statistically actually present by far the lowest recidivism risk. 0.5% of them go back to prison for anything once they've been released.
The first thing that comes to mind when I think about what it took for me to convince the parole board that I was ready to come home was an understanding of how much wrong that I had done that was documented on paper. And so when I walk into the boardroom and there is all of this documentation that talks about every negative thing that I've ever done in my life, and there is no good documentation to talk about the changes.
And one of the big challenges is that a lot of people are housed in prisons that don't have a lot of those programs. So it's very difficult for them to make the kind of showing that the parole board is looking for.
The board has a challenge because they're in a hearing with you for 2 or 3 hours, and they don't get to see you live your life on the yard every day. They don't get to see what men go through to walk away from trouble. They don't get to see what men who were once characterized as very violent, they don't get to see what they do to walk away from violence in such a violent place.
For the most part, parole commissioners, I think, understand that the person sitting across the table from them is not dangerous in the same way he or she was 20 or 30 years ago. And then the focus of the hearing, though, becomes trying to assess whether that person understands why he or she was dangerous back then.
I remember one guy said to me, you might as well forget about it, like we here forever, so just come hang out. And I told him I couldn't do it. The moment that I go to hang out, there's an expectation that my presence means my involvement. And I didn't want that pressure.
With the parole board's current focus on assessing a prisoner's understanding of all the various factors that contributed to criminality in the past, it's requiring lifers to do more digging and soul searching and more work on themselves to figure out what was going on in their family lives and in their relationship with their parents and siblings, any abuse that they experienced, and to try to identify how those different factors contributed to decisions they made. And what we see is a lot of times prisoners going to the parole board haven't really dealt with a lot of those issues, thought about those issues, had an opportunity, had the space to address those issues while they've been in prison. Some of the more effective groups at helping people deal with those things have been started by prisoners at prisons where they have the space and the support within the administration to do that.
I eventually ended up getting permission from the warden at San Quentin to allow me to produce a show called the San Quentin Prison Report. And that turned into video production, which turned into radio production. And to this day, it's still going on. We did the piece at San Quentin, where we went back into San Quentin and got to speak to the guys there. People need to realize how much of a benefit it could be to allowing these men to come back to the community and be examples for what's going on in our communities all across the United States. Who better to model transformation than somebody who has transformed? And this is what our youth need to see.